Hello everybody and welcome back to the Jack Threlfall Show. This is the interview segment for this week's episode and we are joined by a very, very special guest, Andrew Coley. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hello, Jack. Thank you, mate. Much appreciated. Quick lunchtime tea here for me at home. I've got a few weeks off from travelling around the world, but being a very lucky boy, doing what I do. So, yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Awesome. We always start with the same question. So could you just explain a little bit about what your role in motorsport is and how you've arrived at this current position in the world of racing?
Sure. So, yeah, I know you've introduced me already, but my name's Andrew Coley. I am a television commentator in motorsport, which I've been doing since 2009. I would say full-time since 2013. Prior to that, I was a motorsport instructor, and alongside that, I was a rally driver. So that's kind of a little bit of the path, I suppose, to where I am now. At the minute, this year, I am commentating Nitro Rallycross, Extreme E, Rally X, which was Rally X Nordic, which is kind of a second-tier series in Europe, and I was also lucky enough to go and do the Isle of Man TT races for ITV, a big TV station here in the UK. So, yeah, it's been a busy year so far, and I'm enjoying the few weeks of chill that I've got before things kick off again towards the tail end of the season.
Fantastic. And one thing I wanted to start with on the show was just, as a commentator, it feels like one of the biggest challenges to me would be being at the first event of a new series. And since we're at the start of this podcast, I'd love to know how you approach that challenge, whether it's Extreme E or Nitro RX recently. What's the kind of guiding principle that leads you through that first event, and how do you approach it kind of as a task?
Cool. So, do you know what? Funny enough, although Extreme E and Nitro are great examples, obviously I kind of know that arena already. You know, so I when Extreme E came about, I kind of approached them in the background. I was like, look, if you're interested, I might be interested too, as long as it doesn't clash too much with my other series. But a lot of the drivers have come from World Rallycross, and it's the same with Nitro. So when I went to Nitro in 2018, you know, I knew nobody over at Nitro Circus, but obviously I knew most of the drivers had come across from World RX, and also at the time I was doing ARX, America's Rallycross. So those two, it's a little bit easier. You know the sport already, you know the drivers already. You know, if I need to make a few phone calls and go, dude, how's the car? You know, otherwise, it's for me to try. I do some stats on drivers, try and get them together, you know, on what their results are. Although I say most of that is in my head for Rallycross. And then if it's to do with cars, I mean, probably a good example is this year Nitro Rallycross with the FC1X and last year Extreme E. And they couldn't have been at more opposite ends. This has surprised some people. I'd never seen an Extreme E car in the flesh until I went to the UK round last year. The last round, we popped down, me and Jenny Gal popped down on the Thursday for the pre-test, like the shakedown day. I've never seen a car, not even seen it on display. And that's partly because of COVID. But also for Extreme E, we don't go on site. So we're in a studio in London. And I'm going to be really honest, I don't like it. I prefer being on site because I like talking to the drivers. But so that was really challenging because literally you've only got the same pictures that everybody else has got at home. I did get sent the manual. Excuse me. I did get sent the manual for how the car works. So I had to read through that in all the various different bits. I spoke to him about roll bars and sprint settings and all the things you could change on the car to try and get my head around it. Now, Nitro was the complete opposite. Obviously, I knew those supercars very well when I was with them in 2018 and 2019. This year, with the FC1X, and I was lucky enough to see it last year at Rally X in Hollius. I saw it with it had on it RX2 running gear as the test chassis. We did a photo shoot with it out in the woods, which Nitro then used on social. And then finally, when the cars were ready, they'd been testing for a year in the background with Kevin Eriksson. And we had a pre-season test down at Barcelona, so I went down there, and that was brilliant. We had 7 or 8 cars there. There was only one which was being used for testing at the time. And I was lucky enough to get a ride in the car there with Conor Martel in the wet. I've since had a ride with Andreas Eriksson around Strangnes, then Andreas Backer around Strangnes. And that is such an easier way, obviously, to get a feel for what a car is capable of. Now, the flip side to all of that is the Isle of Man TT, which I did this year. And I'm not a bike guy. And bike fans, like rally fans, are hardcore. And I was really nervous, more nervous than I've been about something for a long, long time. If they'd asked me to do the live, as in the live streams or live radio, I would potentially have said no, because I would have needed a lot of lead time to get my head around it. It's not like something like MotoGP where you can watch a bunch of races and get into what's going on in the season. The TT happens once a year, and if you're not following it closely, you don't have that background knowledge. So that one was much harder, but thankfully I was doing the highlights for ITV, meaning I could watch the race live, listen to the live commentary. I had a brilliant co-commentator in Cameron Donald, a great producer in Richard Nichols from Greenlight TV, who I'd worked with before with Greenlight. And so I knew I was in safe hands. So it really, it varies so much depending on what the job is. That's a super long answer for the start of a podcast, I know. But hopefully it's giving you a taste of sort of what goes into it in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about global motorsport, the Isle of Man TT is such an iconic event and so unique. I think there's the Isle of Man and then there's Macau, right? It's basically the only place you see any sort of racing that looks like that with bikes on streets. It's just such a brilliant event, and we tried to cover it a little bit on the show. But what stood out to you then, as approaching that as a first-time commentator, was it just the sheer danger and the speed of it all, and just how crazy it really is that it still happens? How did you kind of process that?
Yeah, I've been to the Isle of Man a lot with Greenlight TV when I was working on Porsche Carrera Cup Asia, and actually I was lucky enough to go to Macau as well. When I think about how lucky some of the experiences have been, to have been to Macau, that was for Porsche rather than the bike week. So I was a bit overwhelmed by it. There's 40, 50 riders, and they're sending through they sent us through a commentary pack, which is the biographies, which is great. So I knew it wasn't live, so you've got time to look stuff up. And I also know that when you cut down an hour and a half race into a 26-minute highlight show, you're not going to see much of it. So the biggest challenge really for me, once I realised we were only likely to see the top 8 to 10 riders, you start to recognise then that those riders use the same numbers across the different race categories. And in your head, you pick up, right, it's this guy, it's this guy, it's this guy. And you can commentate a bit more naturally, a bit more quickly. Also, I wasn't expected to be the expert. I'm a slightly strange one in rallycross in that I came from a role as a driver through then being a rally commentator as the expert, and now I'm a lead commentator, but I also have that background knowledge. So it's a bit different there. With the TT, I've just recognised I'm not supposed to be the expert, I'm supposed to be the hype guy. Cameron has won this on a superbike. I can't get near to that level, so just ask him the questions that I think the viewer wants to know the answer to. So that was what I focused on, really. And Cam is such a great bloke. We had a right laugh working on it. He's a lovely man. And the other thing I had to do was try and learn the bloody track, 37.73 miles. I can't even remember how many corners it is, but it's too many. But you've only got a certain amount of camera positions. So the toughest thing for me was the heli shots and the onboards, because they can be anywhere on the circuit. Whereas around the track, I forget how many trackside cameras there were, and we would move a couple of them each day to keep the footage lively. But once you've nailed where those corners are, and I would go to the gallery, which is where the director sits, I'd watch the first race down at the grandstand in the media room with Cameron and the other presenters. I'd then go up to Greenlight TV while the second race of the day was happening, and I'd watch that race up there, but I'd be with the director and go, what's that corner? Where does that lead to? What's after that? And Cameron had also taken us for a lap in a road car, which was brilliant, 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
Late. And he's funny. He sent me a text message, which I can't say here, but it was to do with hurrying up, basically. I was late. I'm good at that. And he took us around the whole track in this Ford Fiesta rental car, but it was brilliant. He could barely keep up with, at 30 miles an hour, he's like up on the pegs here, down a gear, lean the bike over, aim for the wall, you'll never hit it, full throttle, run the bike out wide, don't hit the white line, stand it up into fourth, up into fifth, over the crest, pop the wheelie. And that's at 30 miles an hour, he couldn't keep up with what he needed to do on the superbike at 160 or whatever. And it just blows your mind. The track would be, people think the Nordschleife is hard to learn. I would argue the TT is a lot harder. And if you make a mistake, obviously, the penalty is a lot harsher. So it's a unique event. I was honoured to be approached by the Isle of Man government to be a part of the broadcast team. I would love to go back if I can. It goes over 2 weekends, and so it may well clash with another series, and then it gets a bit difficult because you can't turn down a season's work for a week's work. But that's the nature of being a freelancer. But yeah, it's a special event, and sitting at the side of the track watching them come by flat out was bonkers. It is, yeah, it's mega. I'm a rally guy, so that closeness to the competition when you're spectating isn't too new to me, but rally cars, even flat out, don't come past you at 180, 190 miles an hour. So yeah, it's a cool event.
No, it's really amazing to hear about, what it's like approaching that for a first time, because I only know as a fan, kind of the deeper you dive into that world of Northern Irish and Isle of Man bike racing culture, it's really fascinating. And then you start to see there's actually other events. There's a series like the Northwest, the Manx Grand Prix, that sort of thing, where they run the bikes actually outside of this, and how people build to it, and then people transfer, try it, and then go back. I'm curious about when you start a new kind of commentary path. How do you approach building chemistry with a commentary partner there? Because so much of what we hear are commentary duos or even trios on air. What's that like, kind of trying to learn the patterns of a different presenter and that kind of whole task?
That's hard. It's one of the hardest things. And once you get to the point where you sound like your mates on air, you're really killing it, because that's really tough to get to. I suppose, how can I put this? So I was the co-commentator for quite a long time at Eurosport, to people like Carlton Kirby and Martin Haven, who, bless them, were brilliant with their advice to me. Try this, try that, try not to do this. Just little things that they said to me. And I suppose I took some of that on board. When you're the lead commentator, the co-commentator might not be a pro broadcaster. I wasn't a pro broadcaster when I started. I hadn't done any of it. So if you're the de facto lead and they are the de facto co-coms, the expert, it's much easier, because you go, right, this is my role, this is your role, you do this, I'm going to do that. And sometimes you get told that by the producers, right, you're doing all the graphics, he's doing all the analysis packages, you do all the results, and so the way they want to edit the show, which I'm sure you can feel the pain of trying to find an edit point in a podcast. So we often put pauses at the front and the back of a graphic to give the editors an easy chop. But then moving on to more recent times, Jenny Gow and me, we share the commentary role on Extreme E. It's much less defined as to how we do it. So we have a few little rules. So, for instance, I'll have a thing where if you put your hand on the other person, Simon Hill taught me this one. He used to commentate for ITV. He said, if I put my hand on if you put your hand on my shoulder, I'll shut up immediately. So you be ready to go with whatever it is you've got. And that's like, have you seen a puncture? Have you spotted something that's absolutely key to what is happening in this race? So that's like a physical cue, and you have to check your co-coms is cool with that, and some are, some aren't. But as a general rule, I have that rule. If if I pat someone, I'm handing off to them. So at first, I might pat them to say, I'm out. You're in. You want to pick up straight away. And if they don't pick up within a second, boom, I'm back in again. And that's your job as a lead. So when I was teaching people like Dan Rook and Hal Ridge to do co-coms, there were lots of those moments where I might pick up again, but they both turned out to be brilliant co-commentators. We had so many co-commentators on World Rallycross and now on Nordic to say Hal is a professional broadcaster now, no doubt about it. But I've actually taught quite a lot of people to do it, which is quite cool, really, to try to pass that experience on to them. And Jenny, I hope, would agree that I've done my very best to help her out with it, because she came to commentary as a presenter, and it's not the same thing at all. It's very different. And I think she's great at it. She's done really, really well. And I know that if she listened back to her first shows compared to now, she'd see the improvement that I can see. She's reacting now to the pictures. She's looking at what the cars are doing and understanding it. And she comes from the complete opposite side of motorsport as well. She comes from F1. So, yeah, it's been great. But that building a new relationship, me and Jared have had to do it in Nitro as well. You've got to figure out what you're both doing. And when you've got two leads, as we have in Nitro, and two leads as you have in Extreme E, you just got to make sure that both of you've got enough space. So it's we have a good time with it.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier your experience before commentary as a rally driver. I wondered if you could just explain a little bit more about what your history was there. What cars were you driving? Where were you driving them? And just what your reflections back on it. I know it's probably a very long story, but
no,
your reflections on the process.
Hold on.
Here we go. Drum roll, please.
That's my first rally car. There we go.
Oh, wow.
Of it. Vauxhall Nova. There you go. It was 3,500 pounds, I think. It had all the right bits on it, but they were not in very good condition. I'll put it back on the wall. Basically, I was 19 years old. I was probably driving a bit too fast, if truth be told. Mum and Dad bought me, I was 18 actually, Mum and Dad bought me a day at a rally school as a birthday present. So I went along on my 19th birthday, drove a Mark II Escort on gravel, absolutely loved it. My instructor was Chris Munnings, Katie Munnings' dad. which is
wow.
mad, isn't it? I said to him, look, I really love this. I want to do it. Like, what do you do? I didn't know how you do it. And, in my mind, I've got the MSA's blue book and I've read it from cover to cover. So I read all the rules for F3 karting. I'm like, she's really complicated. And I haven't figured out that you only had to read the bit on rallying, and the bit on safety. And so, anyway, we went and bought this rally car from literally a used rally car dealer. And it had all the right bits, had the right gearbox in it, it had the right brakes for a budget rally car, it had an engine with Weber twin 40s on it, and I knew nothing about it. I could tell you where the spark plugs were, where the water tank was and the battery, and that was it, literally. And we went to the first event, and the brakes overheated and locked on and melted. And then we went to the second event after I'd learned how to fix the brakes, because we didn't have any money. And then I realised that the engine had blown when the brakes were locked on, but I didn't know that either. And I was too stupid to be watching the gauges. So the engine had gone, so we had to rebuild the engine. And you learn very quickly about the mechanics of cars when you're having to do it all yourself, or with the help of some great friends. Shout out to Mike Carapia, who built my engine. He will like that. So that was the early days. I then entered a couple of awards, the Roger Clark Award, which was for young rally drivers, and I was also on the MSA's first ever kind of elite program, which was called Fit to be Champion. There were 20 rally drivers, including some really great drivers: Ryan Champion, Nick Elsmore, Richard Tuthill, drivers who are much more experienced than me at the time and are still much more experienced than me, much better than me. But I was on both those things, and from that I got a drive with a team called 22 Motorsport. Hold on. And that was their car. So out of Ibiza, I did the National Gravel Rally Championship in that. And then 2001, unfortunately, we parted ways, foot and mouth hit, and I went off, and I didn't do any motorsport for a number of years. Then a Dakar Challenge, which was on Eurosport, and there were a couple of hundred teams entered. We made the final 10. Then we made the final 5. It was to win a drive on the Dakar Rally with Nissan Motorsport. And then I missed out. One more. I missed out. We came second to a Swedish guy. There we go. That was us in Morocco, testing the Nismo. It was more like a Group N category car. So we were the reserve drivers for the Dakar Rally. That was 2006, and that really made me want to get back into motorsport. So I went out and bought a Peugeot 206 Cup car, and we did the MSA National Gravel Rally Championship in 2008, in which we won our class. And the year after that was when I started doing the TV commentary. Quite why I thought winning my class at national level was enough to make me an expert at rallying, I don't know. But I took a chance on the fact that Eurosport didn't have a rally pundit. I knew because I watched every bit of motorsport they did, and they had loads of racing guys and loads of racing pundits. They didn't have a rally pundit, and I kind of spotted that there was a gap for that. I went and said to them, "Can I be that?" And I just, at the time, they needed more people on the motorsport side. They didn't have any money. It took me 6 emails, 3 no's, and an interview where I was told I had a nice voice, but I was a million miles away from being a solo commentator. And somehow here I am. 13 years later, and that's what I do for a living. So, but I'm still very grateful to the guy at Eurosport who gave me a chance. So, yeah, that's the kind of the full story with pictures. Don't think I've done that before.
That's incredible. It's amazing to just learn how one role evolves into another, and also, I think what stood out to me there was looking back at your old cars. If you were to draw a line between that and a modern Extreme E car or a modern Nitro RX category, the difference in technology is incredible. How do you reflect on how the cars have evolved throughout the years and the new kind of electric journey that we're seeing rally racing take?
The way I reflect on it right now is the same similar way I reflect with road cars. You used to be able to do everything yourself, and now you can't do anything yourself. The Vauxhall Nova had about 3 wires on it. There was basically one, the earth, one to the starter. There was to the coil, which was for the spark plugs, and then there was a temperature sensor lead, and that was literally about it. And one for the rev counter. It was so simple. If it wouldn't run, it literally was, is there spark, is there air, is there fuel? It was as simple as that. Now you need a laptop for everything, and probably a degree and a ton of experience. But that's the way it goes, motorsport changes, and whilst there are elements of electric motorsport that I don't like as much. Like, I do miss the noise. I know everyone misses the noise. I've also been in motorsport long enough to know that, my Vauxhall Nova was a very basic piece of kit, and even a World Rally car at the same time as that was an unbelievable weapon of a car. The computing power of a World Rally car now would be an old world rally car wouldn't have been as much as in an iPhone. It's crazy. I read that in one of the Subaru Impreza books. I think you go, look, it's a Lego Group B car. Times change.
I have one of those.
Yeah,
I have
great,
that exact same Lego model.
Yeah, isn't it great? There's your man. Look, lovely. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's so good. But so technology changes, and you have to change with it, or give up the sport you love, and that's why I get a little bit frustrated with the fans sometimes. Oh, I hate this. I'm not watching it. Vomit emojis. All right, off you trot then. You know, I've got a choice of. I love the sport. I love motorsport. I love rally. I love rallycross, and definitely, you know, yeah, if F1 came calling, maybe. But people often ask, do you really want to work on F1? I'll probably shoot myself in the foot here. They'll be like, well, we won't ask him then. So yes, would I be interested? Yes. Is it the pinnacle? You know, is it what I've aimed for? No, because I'm a rally guy, and a rally cross and rally, that off-road thing rings my bell a bit more. Talking about ringing bells, the postman's about to start. The dog's going to go mental. Wait for it.
Another drum roll. There we go.
Exit stage left, going at the post. He'll rip that up before I can get to it.
Nice.
So times have changed a lot. You know, the cars are incredible now, and it is, although physically you can identify lots of the same components on a car in terms of, drivetrain. Obviously, you look at drive shafts and suspension and dampers and springs. Everything is in the same place. The technology's changed a bit, but it's what's happening in the core of the car, your engine and your motors, and how that power comes from fuel or a battery is what's different. And there are some serious challenges for the teams. It's now much more software and trying to map throttle curves to give you the feel that you had from an engine. It's fine on dry tarmac, but once you get onto gravel and wet slippery surfaces or sand, it is much harder to give a driver the feel that they crave to be able to go to the limit, basically.
Absolutely, and I also think with Extreme E, I guess we see it with the Dakar cars too, but the suspension and the way they can ride bumps out. I know it's funny you mentioned F1, because something I had written down was the clip of Nico Rosberg driving his car when he took that out for a test, and his reaction.
He loved it.
The violent electric torque that it had was incredible. Yeah, he seemed amazed about how, Kristofferson could even keep it in a straight line, let alone win races with it. But is that kind of, you think, what has... like the main evolution is that torque, and it's the same when we see those Nitro RX cars. They just actually genuinely look so fast around the track, and it's a real kind of point of application for electric power is those kind of short dirt tracks where you need that fast torque. Is that one of the main kind of opportunities that electric powertrains bring to rallycross?
Yeah, so the thing about electric powertrains in things like Formula E or even, any Dakar, Audi have been using it, but then charging it with a DTM engine, it's all a bit, if you're going on a longer drive, rally, they've had to go hybrid because you can't run an electric motor through an Impohar. There isn't the duration. So, my take on that would potentially have been, should we have been looking at swappable batteries? So if you want to so I race radio control cars, which everyone thinks is hilarious, and I don't care because I love it. It's brilliant. But we changed batteries.
Lewis Hamilton did the same thing,
Yeah, so did Peter Solberg. It's brilliant, mate. I'd always recommend anybody, particularly if you don't have much cash, go radio control car racing. You'll love it. All the things are the same. But the point is, you take the body off, you pull a couple of clips out, and you pull out the battery, and you put another battery in, and that's how you get duration. I know Shisharek's looking into it with his Dakar machine, basically batteries which go into a rack in the side of the car. But if you're not going to do that for rallies, so you have a stack of batteries at the end of each stage, a bit like what they used to do with chase cars, then it's got to be hybrid. And it's the same with endurance rallying, like, or even endurance racing, F1, and anything that's longer than a few minutes. Even Formula E has been about duration the whole time. It's still about duration. How hard do you use the battery, how quickly before it runs out. And it's great. I've been to a few Formula E races this year, and I was really impressed. I have to say this. I love the passing tactics of everything. There's more to it tactically than first meets the eye. But rallycross, we don't have to do any of that. We basically go, right, we're going to race for 4 minutes. How quickly can we rinse all the power out of this battery without setting fire to everything in the car? And it's literally, like 1,000 horsepower in the FC1X is bonkers. It really is. So having sat in the car, I say on tarmac off the launch, that is the single most impressive thing. It is just boom, back in the seat. I can only describe it for people who haven't been lucky enough to do it as like being in first gear in the fastest car you've ever been in. And I mean like an AMG it needs to be. We're not talking a Golf GTI. It needs to be a supercar. Something very fast. And then you've got grip because you've got four-wheel drive. And so add a bit more on for that, but then leave it in first gear forever. So instead of that bit where you go boom and you pull second gear, and in a supercar, that's bloody impressive as well. It's like this and you go again. Supercar acceleration right up into third gear is brutal. But the difference with electric cars is it just that it feels like that's endless. Now, in fact, the NRX cars, the FC1s do have gears. We have 3 gears in them, but each of those gears is so long that in theory you could do 170 miles an hour in that car. So the scope for what we do with regard to track design and things is mad. But that initial acceleration, it's so hard. It's like being on a rubber band that just doesn't stop. It's mad. It's so fast.
And you mentioned the track design there, that being part of a huge part of Nitro RX's kind of selling point and appeal to the fans is they're able to scale out these jumps, these banks, corners. What was that like, kind of seeing from the first time you heard about the series to watching the reality of these new amazing cars take those massive tracks? And yeah, what does that add to the rallycross experience?
So when I got in touch with them in 2018, when I first found out they were doing a rallycross event, at the time I was the lead commentator for both World RX and ARX. I was like, can't help drop them an email, see what comes of it. And I managed to pick up the co-commentator role. And I was over the moon. New series, new experience, go and see what it's like. Turned up to Salt Lake City, to the Utah Motorsports campus. And you sort of walk out in between the grandstands. We have this studio area, and there's the jump like this either side, but obviously with nothing where my head is. And it's 130 foot, that gap. It's absolutely massive. And I looked at it, I was like, well, swear words, it just, look at the size of that. Like, it was just, you couldn't even imagine a car going over it. And then, of course, Travis goes over it. Oh, I get over that in a rental car, he says, and he's up there over it in the Subaru. But then seeing the other drivers with a lot of professional driving experience, some of them being quite nervous about it, and then other drivers being completely okay. Ollie Bennett and Liam Doran. Liam, it's just physics. That was what he said to me. And he's right. That's all it is. It's just physics. Ollie Bennett comes from a motocross background. Backerd and Larson absolutely terrified of it. They'll admit it if you ask them, but once they've got their heads around it, it's just a case of this is the speed at which you hit the jump. And so, but the tracks, to see someone, Travis had gone, look, rallycross is cool, but I think it could be a lot cooler. This is how cool I think it could be, was brilliant. And that was when I really knew that I wanted to be on board with it. And to see what they did with the tracks last year was just great. You go to ERX and you're like, oh my God, wow. And then, we went on to Phoenix and it's just wow. Glen Helen, wow. And then even when we went to a more tarmac style track at the firm, we still got the big gap jump and the Joker underneath it, crossover style. They know how to push dirt. They're brilliant at it. In World RX, we used to build a jump 8 months before, and have it inspected 18 times. And they push a bit of dirt about. Travis goes out on a motocross bike and goes, it's not quite right. Can you do this? Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Put a degree on it. Just a minute, let's go. And it's done. So it was just a very different experience to working with European motorsport. And I loved it. It was great. So long may it continue. And I'm looking forward to getting back to the States with Nitro at the end of September. About a month from now, we'll be at ERX Motor Park, Minnesota. It's going to be good. It's going to be good fun. Then we'll get to see what the FC1X can do over the big jumps. Then we're going to really see it.
Absolutely, it should be a really cool event. And it seems like that ambition was a huge part of Travis's kind of selling point for the series, and saying that, look, we don't really have we have the freedom to be creative with how we want to run this series. We've got the drivers, we've got the commentators, of course, and yeah, like we just spoke about the track design. I wanted to jump back to Extreme E now, because we spoke earlier about the Formula One link. And that happens not only just with the Rosberg team, but also with Hamilton, and also in a way with Carlos Sainz and Carlos Sainz Senior too, and Jenny, of course, as well. But how do you view the fact that we're seeing proper global motorsport entities look to invest in Extreme E? Is that a really key sign of growth of the series and a significant demonstration of its value and role in global motorsport when we see even teams like McLaren looking to get involved now?
I think it is. I think also it's a mark of how clever the organisers are to make sure those kind of characters are on board in the first place. So when when European Rallycross was first looking to become World Rallycross, Peter Solberg was asked early doors, could you be involved? How can we help you be involved? Because you need a big name to help with the reach. And I'm certain that Extreme E did that in the background. But also, you don't get these people involved if they don't believe in what's going on in the background. People like Lewis, who've got a great moral compass, in my opinion. He believes in a lot of the stuff that Extreme E's doing. Likewise with Rosberg. Rosberg is really big on sustainability and technology. But to get those names involved, of course, with Jenson Button was driving in the first year and is still a team name at the moment. It's very clever. I think Alejandro knows exactly what he's up to. He did it with Formula E. He's now doing it with Extreme E. How to attract those sponsors and get them on board is clever work, basically. And I think they're doing really well. As you say, to get McLaren on board is amazing. I think this season's been good fun as well, and obviously hasn't been hampered in quite the same way by COVID. Obviously, two races in Sardinia wasn't ideal, although the races were both really good. We want that global thing, and COVID has tripped us up a little bit with that, unfortunately. And then, of course, what's going on in the Western Asia, Europe affected Sardinia as well. So there we go. It's a great series, and they do a great job of attracting the big names. And I think that just gets different eyes onto it. That's one of the things that you were keen to do in Nitro, is get other drivers or riders from other series in that guest car. You get other eyes on it, and that's what Extreme E is doing. Can we get Hamilton and Rosberg fans and Button fans to watch this off-road series? Because traditionally they probably wouldn't have done. They wouldn't have off-road much, but I don't get it. Hook them, and it's really cool.
Absolutely. It seems like kind of cross-category riding or driving is a huge part of Travis Pastrana's career. The fact that he's, even in things like NASCAR, he's been willing to make those moves and kind of take those risks and become, a sort of cross motorsport figure. I know F1 fans listening to this will look back on Kimi Räikkönen's NASCAR race last weekend as a really interesting storyline, just to see drivers that we all know and love take on new challenges. Just wrapping up, I also wanted to touch on your advice and what you would look to kind of, you spoke about all your mentors throughout your career and all the people that have helped you evolve, both as a driver and now a commentator. But for young people looking to enter maybe motorsport media or even sports media more broadly, how would you kind of suggest they approach that, and what were the key kind of lessons that you would have for them?
Well, let me go back and touch on the Travis thing first of all, because you mentioned about multi-disciplines, and I love that. I'm a huge fan of Travis. Obviously, comes from an FMX background through to rallycross, the Gymkhana stuff. He is very, very capable in a car. You don't beat the drivers that he's beating in those cars unless you're very capable. Likewise, the likes of Kristofferson, Ekstrom, the multi-discipline winners. And I think when somebody wins across disciplines, Solberg, rally and then rallycross world champion, Loeb, rallycross, circuit racing, endurance racing. Loeb's one of the best ever. He might well be the GOAT. I'd love to see Lewis is the one I desperately want to see when he's done with F1. I want to see him go and do some motorsport for fun. I don't know whether he will or not, because I know he's got a lot in his career he'd like to achieve outside motorsport. But I would love to see someone like Lewis come and have a crack at Nitro Rallycross. Valentino Rossi, come on, you're done with bikes now.
Let's do some
Rallycross. Those people that cross over the different disciplines, I always have huge respect for. We used to see it so much more in the old days. And now where people are super specialists, you don't see it quite so much. So I would like to see that. So, in terms of getting into the industry, I love my job. I wouldn't say, I don't think lucky is the right word. I always think I'm fortunate that it paid off, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who try to do it and it doesn't pay off. So I'm very grateful that fortune has played a part. But it's not really luck, it's work. And that's what you have to do, is you've got to get after it. People don't come to you as a general rule and go, here's a cool job. You go to them and go, I really want to do this cool job. How can I do it? Can I make the tea? Eurosport's my best example of it. You remember what I said earlier on about being a million miles away from a solo commentator. Fair enough, he was right. He said, we don't have a training scheme. We don't have any money to train you. And I said, okay, please can I come in and watch somebody else do it? For nothing. I said, I'll come and sit here and watch it. So I travelled the 80 odd miles to the studio to go and watch a guy do it. I did that twice. Put the cans on, listened to the counts from Paris, looked at where he got the scripts from online, what he did to edit a script written by a French person who's at a rally in Hungary. It's interesting. And then I went in twice as the co-commentator for nothing, just to kind of prove, look, if I'm on air, this is how I'll be. And when I listened back to those first shows, I'm not great. I wouldn't expect to be. But I wedged a foot in the door, and I proved that I had the commitment to do it. Even if you're not going to pay me, please let me have a crack at this. And that would be my advice, really. You can't go doing loads of stuff for free. I've only ever done it, Goodwood Festival of Speed. I said, I'll come and do your media day for free. If you like what I do, then let's talk turkey for the rally stage. It's that kind of thing. So don't get mugged off into doing loads of stuff for free. But don't overlook doing things for free as a great way to get experience. And that applies to all elements of motorsport, really. You know, whether you're looking to be an engineer, go and make the tea for a rally team. Wash their wheels. They will be so pleased somebody has come for free. It's expensive. Nearly every team will take a volunteer to do something and just watch, get an idea of what everybody's doing. The same with social media. If you've got a local team and they're doing, I don't know, banger racing, whatever it is, say, could I come along and run your Instagram and your Twitter for the weekend? And then move up to a national team or a regional team and just keep knocking on those doors and building up that experience until someone says, you know what, you like what you do, let's pay you to do it. Yeah, work your way up. Go and do your local football stadium, then a bigger one, then some radio, then some TV. Keep plugging away and, you get there. It's worth it, I promise.
No, that's incredible. It's definitely been a theme. You know, we've spoke to such a range of people across motorsport through the show, and I think it's just the pride that people that have succeeded in the industry, like yourself, have when they get to reflect back on, the achievements of their career and how they've got there. It is a really, really special job, and hopefully we can inspire some more people to get along that path and find some success. It's mega hard work. It is like we do some long hours. There are times where things are going horribly wrong and you're on air and you feel so exposed, but it's brilliant. You know, I think anything that is challenging is rewarding, and that's worth remembering as well. You know, nothing that comes easy is that great. And that's the point, really. So go for it. Fantastic. Well, that's a brilliant message. I think we can wrap up the interview there. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on. It's been a really, really great episode to get back into it. And we'll all look forward to the rest of the Nitro RX and the Extreme season. Thank you, mate. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm honoured. And the best of luck with your career as well.